I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 349. And today we are back with our last bonus turkey hunting podcast, and our guest is outdoor writer and turkey hunting extraordinaire Andrew Johnson, who's going to be speaking with us and going deep into the world of turkey vocalizations. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by Onyx. Today, we are joined by Andrew Johnson. He's an outdoor writer and contributor to such publications as Turkey and Turkey Hunting Magazine and Meat Eater. And Andrew is going to help us examine 6 of the most common turkey vocalizations that every hunter should know. And we're going to explore what they mean to a turkey, how to replicate them as a hunter, and when and how to do this in a hunting situation. So in short, we're getting some great turkey calling advice and know-how from a very well-informed and experienced turkey hunter. I'm going to say, though, real quick before we move on, if you're enjoying all this bonus turkey hunting content and you've got some more turkey tags to fill, make sure you head over to themeateater.com and check out all of our turkey hunting articles. We've put up dozens and dozens of new turkey stories, and it's really good stuff. So head on over there to do some reading as soon as you can. So now, with that out of the way, without further ado, let's get into our turkey chat with Andrew Johnson. All right, with me now on the line is Andrew Johnson. Welcome to the show, Andrew.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I appreciate you taking some time to do this and being flexible with me. Off air, we were just talking about I've had a newborn, just nuclear cataclysmic fit going on here in our household, so it's been an interesting day. But I'm glad we can talk turkeys. And, you know, what we're doing here, Andrew, is a series of bonus, short and sweet turkey hunting episodes here on Wired to Hunt, bringing in various experts to talk about specific turkey topics here during the month of April. So for folks that aren't familiar with who you are, what you do, can you give us like the really short, sweet intro to who you are and what your turkey hunting experience or background is?
Sure. Well, I'm a South Dakota kid, and I grew up hunting pheasants primarily. And then that kind of evolved into deer hunting and turkey hunting. And about 10 or 15 years ago, I got a job with a national turkey hunting magazine called Turkey and Turkey Hunting. And at the time, I literally hadn't even hunted turkeys, more or less killed one. So I basically stumbled through a couple of years of editing stories on turkeys and turkey hunting, and also learning from some of the best in the business. And then, I mean, I'm sure you've heard it before, and also people who've experienced it. Once one rattles his head off on his way in, you're hooked. So since that time, I try to get out every spring, and we're going to make a run at it here in the Black Hills if things pan out this spring. But no, it's good to talk about turkeys and the outdoors and thinking of brighter days ahead.
Yeah, this is definitely a time when we need a nice distraction like turkey hunting more than ever.
Yeah.
So with that said, then you've also done some writing for Meat Eater, and a recent article of yours really caught my attention about turkey vocalizations and the 6 most important turkey vocalizations to know about. So I thought maybe the way we could frame our quick conversation here is just around what those 6 are.
Sure.
And just kind of walk through what they mean, why they're important, how we as hunters should use those calls possibly. So to kick it off, I guess, you wrote in that article that the problem in many cases is that oftentimes when turkey hunters go out in the spring, they have these very one-sided conversations. I think you rewrote specifically, the quote here is, "The problem, however, is that springtime conversations often become one-sided as hunters hammer away without realizing the meaning of the calls they're using." So right out the gate, Andrew, why is that a problem? Why is it an issue that hunters are calling away without knowing what the heck their calls mean?
Sure. Well, just like anything else, there's context involved. And context is a relative term in the turkey woods. I mean, calls you use right away in the morning are different than in the afternoon. They vary by region, different things like that. And I've been guilty of this a number of times too, is I'll pick up a new call and I'll sit in my basement and think, man, I sound really good. And as soon as I step into the turkey woods, I want to use it. I just want to hammer away, and that's not really how you want to go about it. I mean, less is more, and that's why I said it's a one-sided conversation. Is we're more interested in our calls and just hearing ourselves yelp and really sound good, rather than trying to ease into a conversation with those birds and then start the back and forth.
How do you think about that when you're out there in the woods and you are hearing how birds are responding to you, do you literally hear a hen yelp or a hen do something or a bird gobble and you say, okay, that means X, now I'm going to respond in this kind of way? Or is it a little more subtle than that? Sure.
Everything has to be taken into consideration. Now, if you can see the birds and there's a boss hen in there and she cuts you off, if you start yelping and she cuts you off and starts walking the other way, well, you got to change your strategy and figure out how you can get in with her first before you start trying to go after her gobbler. Whereas if you are walking through and you're just kind of running and gunning and you hit a box call and a series of yelps and a gobbler blows your doors off and then everything you throw at him, he's cutting you off, well, then you're in business. So it's a give and take, and I've screwed up more hunts than I've had success at. Let me throw that out there. And you have to learn from those. And instead of just hanging your head and, walking back to the truck, trying to figure out what went wrong, you have to look at what went right and see, well, I got to this point, how can I carry it a step further? Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with that conversation, because they're telling you stuff, not only with the calls they use, but with their body posture, how they're moving around, different things like that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's drill down into then that aspect of what they're telling you, specifically with the vocalizations. The 6 main vocalizations you talked about were the yelp, the tree yelp, clucks and putts, cutting, purring, and gobbling. Let's start at the top with the yelp. And I guess maybe, do you have stuff with you to actually give us a sound of what you would say each of these sounds like?
Well, I do, and also for those in the audience who are new, I wrote this. I used to work with Spencer. Spencer used to write for me with an outdoor publication I ran here in the Dakotas, Spencer Newarth from Meat Eater. And he reached out and said, hey, I need a basic 101 piece on turkey calls and vocalizations. One thing I didn't include in there, but it's an awful useful resource, is the NWTF has wild turkey sounds on its website, and it runs through all of them. And the way I learned how to do some of these calls, and I know the way some other people have learned how to do these calls, is by playing the audio files online and then trying to replicate them on a box call, slate call, mouth call, what have you.
Yeah.
So for starters, I just wanted to throw that out there, that because I'm not a good caller. I'm not. I know what to listen for and know those audible cues on when I can move and when I should approach or when I should back off. But as far as the calling goes, I mean, I'm average at best.
So is it fair though to say though that that's almost reassuring to hear?
Yeah, and,
I think,
and it's good enough. And it's like anything else. A little bit of luck comes into play, but also so understanding when you should use a call is almost as important as how it should sound, if that makes sense.
No, it does.
Because you don't, like our conversation, you didn't phone me up and say, "Goodbye, Andrew." You know, you're the first words out of your mouth were, "Hey, how are you?" It's kind of the same with turkey calls. Because if you show up and just start cutting and yelping as loud as you can right away, I mean, I can only imagine the turkeys kind of look at each other and say, like, what is this dude or gal doing? I mean, that isn't how they communicate. It's out of context. Huh. So that's why I picked these 6 basic calls because they're pretty much universal and they're the most, I would say, the most used or most heard. You know, biologists have found 29 different calls. Some say they're 30, some say there's 25, but you get the idea. There's literally dozens of calls turkeys use, and in the woods, every given spring, you're only going to hear 4 or 5, maybe 6. I mean, that's about the extent of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to, so if people want a tangible resource, I would encourage them going to nwtf.org. But yeah, I have some calls here that can show you how poor of a caller I am, as well as, proof that being average at this is okay.
Yeah. Like I said, I like the fact that it's okay just to be average and you can still get it done when you have this more holistic understanding of knowing the context, knowing what it means, knowing when to apply it. That's really great to know. So can you give us a really quick example? Okay, what's a yelp? And then talk me through the context of that, what it means and what we should be thinking about when using it as a hunter.
Sure. A yelp, it's basically kind of the foundation for the rest of the calls. It's the most generic turkey call there is. You know, and that I could have combined yelps and tree yelps into one because essentially they're the same thing, but a yelp is a yelp. It's a 2-note call. A lot of people, especially with mouth calls, have trouble making the first note of the call, which is typically a higher pitch, breaking down into lower pitch. So I have a slate call on hand, and it's an acrylic or glass call. But I chose it because when I drag the striker slowly across the surface, I won't make the yelp at first. I want to make the 2 notes first. So it'll be a drawn out call where you hear the high pitch to low pitch. So let's see if I can get it to where you can hear it. It'll be high to low. So it's almost like a teenager whose voice is cracking, just in the opposite direction, if that kind of puts it into context. So did that come through okay?
Yeah, sounded great.
Right on. So now that you hear the high to low and with kind of that break, now you add the rhythm and tone and context to it, because again, in the wood, you're trying to sound like a lovesick hen. Like this is going against their nature. In nature, the gobbler gobbles and hens go to him. So you're trying to coax him along and you know, I hate to say it, but it's like you're saying, "Hey, big boy, I'm over here." You know what I mean? So a little tone, a little rhythm, and a little cadence. That's about all it is.
And so this is basically that wooing call, letting them know, like, hey, we're over here. Now, when you're hearing that, so the opposite, you like to make that call, try to bring them to you. But what if you hear turkeys out there yelping, knowing, okay, there's some hens out there, they're yelping. What does that tell you, and how does that change your plans when you hear another real live bird doing that?
Sure. I try to match the hens. And I think that's a common sentiment a lot around a lot of turkey hunters, is I'm using the same language, so to speak, she's using. So if she's cutting me off, you know, as I yelp, I'm going to cut, and I'm going to cut her right off the next time she makes a sound. you're trying to spar with her and raise her curiosity and raise her territorial awareness, because turkeys are territorial, man. I mean, they just are. And hens are that way too. So if you're calling to a group of birds where a gobbler is flocked up, you're not really calling to the gobbler. You're calling at the hens. You're trying to work your way in with them. Now, the reason I chose this acrylic call also is it has a little bit of rasp, but if I want to play kind of a more submissive tone, I have another call here from, it was a birthday present from a buddy of mine from CNS Custom Calls, but it's a slate call. Now, there isn't as much rasp, which, I mean, what I've learned out here in the prairie birds that I hunt a lot is I'm always hunting birds that are flocked up. So I have to deal with the hen a lot. If I'm more submissive, I've found it gives me a fighting chance. If I try to be as bossy as her, in the wide open where they know, I mean, they're looking around and they know exactly what's going on. You're not hidden by ravines and hardwood trees. You're exposed. But if I go soft without rasp and kind of more subtle and try to almost be, the little sister to that hen, I've had more luck. So here's a different slate call, and you'll be able to hear that it's not as raspy. So it's a little bit higher, not nearly as, the sound will carry because of the call's make, but without hardly putting any pressure with the striker. I don't want to get raspy or bossy at all. I want to be soft and subtle.
Yeah. I was going to ask, you mentioned a little bit earlier the fact that there's a certain level of importance with how you start a conversation, the context of how you begin conversations, end them, et cetera, et cetera. In the turkey world, where does a yelp fit into a conversation? Is it okay to start with the yelp, or should you ease into it a little bit more?
No, a yelp is a great way to start the conversation. You just don't want to, if you have birds roosted and you're set up within a roosting location, you don't want to start yelping and just hammering away before the birds are even awake. This is a call that you would work into with tree yelps, which is the second call that everyone should know. And it's just a very, very soft, subtle call used when birds are still on the limb. And it's really nasally because they make it almost with their beaks closed as they're waking up, trying to sort out the pecking order for the day. And gobblers are gobbling, trying to collect their harem. Hens are answering. If you ease into the conversation with a tree yelp, it's much more realistic than cutting and yelping and just coming in guns blazing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Can you give us an example of
that? Of a tree yelp?
Yeah.
A tree yelp, typically with a mouth call works a lot better. I don't have a mouth call with me. You can make it with any call, a friction call or a mouth call. But it's soft and subtle, and it's very leading, or almost, how would I say it? It's almost pleading. So it's just very soft. If you were in the woods and the birds are still on the limb, they're awful hard to hear the way it is. If the wind's blowing at all and you're upwind, you're not going to hear it.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co, and make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. You ever get that feeling you're stuck inside staring at screens and a primal urge kicks in? You crave wide open spaces, fresh air, the chance to connect with the land. Well, maybe it's time to find your own piece of the wild, but searching for property can be a maze. That's where land.com comes in. They got millions of listings across the country, from mountain ranches to hidden fishing holes. Their search tools are like a seasoned guide helping you narrow down what you want. Land.com isn't just about buying and selling. It's about finding a place to hunt, fish, explore, or simply sit by a campfire and listen to the crickets. So head over to land.com today to turn one day into today, because trust me, there's nothing quite like the feeling of standing on your own piece of earth.
What's your perspective on calling then on the roost? So is it just tree yelps, or are you gonna get into a regular yelp and then shut up and then not talk until they come down? There's a lot of debate around how much to call. It's when I first started turkey hunting, I think like a lot of people, it's so tempting that every time they gobble back to you when they're on the roost, and they do many times, you just want to keep them talking, and then you can just go and go and go. And I found that was not such a good idea eventually. What's your take on that?
I'd agree completely. And that what you just described is a perfect example of how that conversation becomes one-sided and you become tone deaf to what's really going on. Less, when the birds are on the limb, less is more. And I don't make any kind of sounds until I hear a bird gobble or hear a hen yelp, whether it's from a roost next door or the roost I'm hunting or, way off in the distance. I want that audible cue that it's okay to start making turkey talk. And then if I'm using decoys, I will throw out a tree yelp, just basically saying, hey, I'm over here. Just a soft indicator, and if they hear it, great. If not, not a big deal. It is what it is. Sometimes they're going to hear that call. Sometimes they're not, based on the terrain and wind and everything else. But it's okay to throw one or two out, but by rule of thumb, I wait for them to make the first move. If your decoys are in a spot where those rooster birds can see you in the morning or even mid-morning or mid-afternoon, it's okay to throw out a yelp just to kind of draw their attention, but then you have to kind of let them make the next move.
So once that happens, then you throw a little yelp, they gobble back. How long will you carry on from that point, or is it then done? Now okay, they know I'm here. Now I'm waiting until they come down.
If we're talking still on the roost,
yeah.
If they're still on the roost, if I put a tree yelp out and now it's different. If I have a gobbler roosted alone and I know he's alone, it's rare. But if I know he's alone, then I'm going to try and get him with anything I can before another hen comes into play or before he joins up another group of birds. But if he's roosted or multiple gobblers are roosted with some hens and everything, I'm playing by their rules. They have an established pecking order, and I just kind of want to fit in. So if he cuts my tree yelp off, and if I cluck and he gobbles, if he's gobbling at a cluck before he's off the limb, we're in business. But if it's all quiet on the western front, I just let it sit. If he's giving me an answer and I know he knows where I'm at, I'm going to let him make the next move. But if he is incessant, if he's tuned up to the point where you could sneeze and he's going to gobble, I keep going after him because I want him to stay focused on me, because other hens are going to hear this. They're going to hear him and move in, and I want it to be a one-on-one phone call from that point on.
Yeah. You mentioned clucks, which is your next vocalization, clucks and putts. Yeah. Can you talk us through what those mean, what they sound like?
Yeah, clucks and putts, man, they're hard to know the difference, which is also why I kind of said you have to take body language into consideration. If you can hear a bird clucking, I think I wrote it's like a Marco Polo. You ever play that game when you were growing up?
Yeah.
You say it's just their way of keeping tabs on one another. And that's how it was explained to me. And hens are making noise all the time. They're purring and clucking all the time. whether you can hear it or not. It's just constant. So it's an everyday, every minute, basically, part of their conversation while they're walking around. So it's very natural to add into the conversation from a hunting perspective, just kind of reminding them, hey, I'm over here. And it's just a short staccato note that is basically like a locator call. So the bad thing is an alarm putt, if danger's around or if you get busted, sounds very similar. But a bird running away making the sound as opposed to a bird just picking its way through an alfalfa field, context, again, is important because that'll tell you what kind of call it is. So another way to look at a cluck is how we say the word dude. Like, you can inflect the word dude about 40 different ways. Dude. There's all these, and we all know what they mean. Turkeys know the meaning. So when you're throwing out clucks, you want to make it sound like, hey, I'm over here. I know where you're at. And then if they respond to that, then clucking is a way to lead into cutting and more yelping to carry on the conversation.
Okay.
So
is that something you can give us a little example of too?
Yeah, it's really easy to do. It's much easier than a yelp, from my experience, on a mouth call. But on a slate call or even on a box call, you can replicate a cut. First of all, for anyone listening who hasn't ever run a friction call, whether it's a box call or a pot and peg call or a slate call, the striker or the friction surfaces should never leave contact from one another. So you're not moving the striker, picking it up, and replacing it back on the surface. It stays in contact the whole entire time. Same thing with the paddle on a box call. It stays in contact with the box the entire time, whether you're going back and forth or whatever. But on a pot call or a slate call, a cluck is really easy to make. It's just short staccato note. And you can lead into it with a yelp or whatever. It's a cluck. And that's about all it is.
Short and sweet.
Short and sweet. Louder is kind of a dude, and a softer is just a, hey, I'm over here, dude.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I picture it in my mind.
Yeah, I like that. I was going to transition to if you've got the yelp, which is kind of sweet talking a little bit, and the clucks and putts are kind of like the dude right here. Then the next thing I feel like if we're transitioning through our conversation is cutting, which at least from the way I've understood it has always been a much more aggressive situation when you get to that. Am I right in that? And if so, can you give me a little more context with how you think about it?
Yeah, cutting isn't a normal part of the conversation. I think that might be a way to phrase it. Cutting is definitely next level as far as the conversation goes. If you have a gobbler wound up, or if you're sparring with a hen and she's working, like you can tell she's coming toward you, whether you can see her or just hear her. Cutting is a way to take it to the next level. And I finally pulled up the article so I could read exactly what I wrote. But it's an intense series of loud, erratic clucks. There's no rhythm. There's no rhyme or reason. But it's, you can cluck. No, I'm on a box call now. So you can cluck and lead into cuts like that. And if they respond to that, you're in business. I mean, this is a closing the deal type of call. Or if gobblers are hung up and they're fired up, but they're just not committing past that, the 40-yard mark. If you're, talking about ethical shotgun range or whatever your comfortable bow range is, if you want to lead them a step further, I mean, it does not hurt to try cutting. And if their posture changes and that kind of scares them off, and you read that body language, okay, now I back off. I go back to what was working and got them to this point. Yeah. But on a slate call, can just cut and lead into a series of yelps.
Yeah. And so that's breaking the hang up.
It's an added degree of realism that can, it can either fire a bird up to make him cross that threshold that he won't break from, or it can help engage that boss hen even more.
Yeah. So that's like the aggressive approach to dealing with a hung up bird. I feel like the next vocalization is a little bit like the passive approach, where sometimes I've thought, okay, I really got to get after him, so I'll start cutting. The flip side is sometimes I'm thinking, you know what? Okay, I'm gonna lay back now, and I'm just gonna shut up completely, or I'll just do a little bit of light purring, just so you know something's still here. Is that how you ever look at it with this next vocalization, which is purring, as I alluded?
Yeah, and purring is a close contact call. If a bird's 500 yards away on a ridge, he's not going to hear you purring, right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is close quarters combat, just as you're trying to put one more nail in that bird's coffin. Purring, a lot of guys purrs and clucks together. I mean, it's a lethal combo. Again, because birds do it all day long. I think if one way I might try to do this is, on the NWTF site that I mentioned earlier, they actually have a 10-second clip. It's a cluck and purr, and I'm going to crank my volume up on my computer. See if you can hear this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so turkeys eat all day long, and when they're just strolling through the woods, it's a territorial call, and it's also a call of contentment.
And so you're going to pull that out when, again, there's something close, but they need to just have that reassurance.
Yep, everything's all right. I'm in especially if I'm using decoys, and if I have a mouth call in, purring and clucking on a mouth call. Man, it probably took me 3 or 4 years before I had something that sounded somewhat like a turkey. But if you can, you try to use it with a mouth call, because if turkeys are that close, you don't want to be running a striker across the slate or having to adjust your hands to get back on the gun.
Yeah.
But it's just reassuring them that, I'm a turkey, I'm over here. If you want to keep coming this way and check me out, you're more than welcome.
Yeah. So the next vocalization, then, we've talked through a lot of calls that the hens are making, but the last one is gobbling. So, of course, we know what a turkey gobble sounds like. That's the sound we're all turkey hunting for. That's the thing that gets us amped up and excited. But talk to me about how you interpret gobbles. When we hear a turkey gobble, are there different types of gobbles that make you think differently, or is the timing or cadence or like how often they're doing it? Are there any things like that you're listening for that then change your strategy?
Yeah, sometimes gobbles. It's the only true mating call. All these other calls turkeys use throughout the entire year for different purposes. There isn't a hen call out there that's strictly for mating. Gobbling is strictly for mating. And I think when you're in the woods, you can tell if it's a gobble. If a tom is just gobbling on the roost, just a gobble, it'll ring out and you'll hear it. But when he's all fluffed up and fired up at 50 yards or even 100 yards, you can tell there's more guts to it, if that makes sense. It's throatier and deeper, and when they mean business and when they're fired up, it's at a different level.
Yeah. Do you ever make gobbles? Is that something that's in your repertoire?
I've tried, and years ago I had one of those gobble shaker things, where you shake it. But I personally don't use them. I will use other sounds in addition to calling. Like I'll scratch leaves and I'll take my hat off and beat it against a tree to make like wing beat sounds, like I'm flying off the roost in the morning. Different audible cues like that. It just enhances your setup or your calls. But gobbling, no, I leave that to the gobblers. Plus, I've tried to do it on a mouth call, and every other way. And I don't know. I don't sound anything like a turkey.
Yeah. So this is obviously imperative stuff to understand when it comes to getting out there and talking with turkeys, understanding some of the stuff you've covered. It's great. What would be, if we're going to close it down, because these are much shorter and sweeter than my usual episodes, I feel weird shutting it down so soon because it's so great, but that's what we're trying to stick to.
That's all right.
What would be that, I mean, having edited turkey and turkey hunting, having talked to so many great turkey hunters, been out there so much yourself, probably been with some people that are still learning maybe as well. What's that thing that so many people are screwing up? What's that mistake that is haunting so many of us when it comes to calling or understanding calling? If we could correct that one thing, what would that be?
Sure. Without a doubt, it's calling too much. 100%. People, the best turkey hunters that I've hunted with, and I've been blessed to hunt with some of the greats. You know, Eddie Salter, Alex Rutledge, Tad Brown, Chris Parrish, Steve Stoltz, Brian Lovett. These guys, the biggest thing, the ace in their back pocket is that they have that most other people don't, is patience. And they will wait out a bird until the cows come home. They won't say a word. Because if that turkey is down and on the ground and moving around and he isn't spooked and he's not running the other way, there's no reason to try. I mean, you can try to coax him. I mean, sometimes we only have an afternoon to hunt. So you're kind of forced to make the action happen. And I love taking the fight to a bird. And sometimes I'll just crawl after him. Like, because I'm out there to kill him, right? I'm not out there to watch him.
Right.
Even though I love doing it, but I'm out there to kill him. And sometimes you have to force the issue, but the really good turkey hunters, even though they're world champion callers and they have world titles on the wall, calling isn't the number one thing in their arsenal. I would say it's patience and understanding how and when to move and where to set up. They understand those put you in a place to call, and then you can use calling if needed. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I'm going to ask you an impossible question, but I'm hoping for some kind of guideline. I think people listening will say, okay, that makes sense. I shouldn't overcall. But how do I know when I'm overcalling? Is there anything, any guideline or something to keep in mind for folks to help them know when they're at that line when okay, I should probably stop, or this is too much? Like, anything to help people there?
The only thing I can think of is if you can see turkeys, you know, if you're calling to a gobbler, or if you're calling to a henned up gobbler, where essentially you're talking to the hens, you have to read their body language. I mean, so if you call too much and those birds start working away from you, or if you call once and that hen takes off the other way, that'd be a good indicator to me, hey, I'm not going to call. And then the next day, like if I live to hunt the next day where I don't booger them out of there too bad, I understand the next time I go in, I don't need to be calling. I need to set up, and that's where scouting and understanding how terrain and habitat and food sources come into play, and hopefully you understand their daily travel pattern and use that to your advantage. Calling more than anything is just a way to seal the deal.
There you go.
If you can see turkeys, I mean, reading their body language can help you understand how much to call. If you can't see the birds, man, if you have a gobbler responding and he's cutting you off at every step of the way, or even if he gobbles once and he double gobbles and cuts off a yelp, sometimes I won't even call anymore. He knows where you're at. You know, so you don't ever want to overdo it. I don't think there is such a thing as undercalling a bird, if that makes sense. I think people screw up hunts because they call too much, but I've never heard it where someone says, oh, I should have called more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So tread lightly, less is more, and just, you got to take everything into consideration. If no other birds around you are talking, it wouldn't be a good idea to be the loudest voice out there.
Yeah. context. I feel like a moral of this story is take into account the context of the situation, what's going on, what the other birds are doing. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, this has been great. I appreciate you walking us through this and giving everyone a primer on turkey vocalizations.
Yeah. Again, there's plenty of resources out there people should use. I appreciate the call. Hopefully someone can take something we talked about and put it to good use. But yeah, less is more. Tread lightly and shoot them in the head. That's all I got.
That's all you need to know. All right, Andrew. Yeah. Well, thank you, and good luck with your turkey hunting this spring.
All right, Mark. Thanks for the call.
All right, and that is going to do it for us today. I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope your turkey hunts are going well so far this year. Man, it feels good to be out there hearing those gobbles. I've been taking my 2-year-old son out without a weapon. We're just going out there to try to call him in, and it's just been a blast. And I hope you're enjoying some of those same great experiences out in the wild. So until next time, thank you again for listening, and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. Hey everybody, listen up. I got mega huge news. MeatEater Live is heading back out on the road. That's right. Join me and the crew. Clay Newcomb, Cal, Yanni, Spencer's going to be there. Phil the engineer's going to be there. MeatEater Live headed back out. Now, when you get every ticket, okay? Every ticket you buy, you get a signed copy of our new MeatEater Outdoor Cookbook. This tour is celebrating the release of the book. Buy a ticket, get a signed copy, MeatEater Outdoor Cookbook, wild game recipes for the grill, smoker, camp stove, and campfire, which I'll point out is a $38 value. Here's where we're going to go. April 23rd, the Mesa Arts Center in Mesa, Arizona. April 24, the Balboa Theater in San Diego. April 25, the Grove in Anaheim, California. April 27, the Crest Theater in Sacramento. April 29, the Union in Salt Lake City. April 30, the Egyptian in Boise. May 1, the Wilma Theater in Missoula. May 2, the Bing Crosby Theater in Spokane, Washington. May 4, Revolution Hall in Portland, Oregon. And May 5, the last day of the tour, Pantages Theater in Tacoma, Washington. For tickets and more information, visit the events page at themeateater.com. Hope to see you at the show.